In modern world history, one extraordinary and almost unbelievable phenomenon is that the Americans bombed Japanese cities, occupied Japanese women, and plundered Japanese wealth, yet most Japanese people do not hate Americans at all. In fact, not only do they not harbor hatred, but they also feel gratitude and respect toward Americans. In 1951, when MacArthur left Japan, as many as 200,000 Japanese people lined the route from the general headquarters of the Allied powers to Tokyo International Airport, braving the rain to see him off. From MacArthur's residence to the airport, they wept bitterly and called out MacArthur's name with deep sorrow. Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Yoshida wrote a heartfelt farewell letter, expressing his profound sadness and shock at MacArthur's sudden departure. "Your hasty and unannounced departure from our land has brought me such a great impact and sorrow." Some Japanese artisans made a custom kimono for MacArthur, stitched with 70 million threads, said to symbolize the sentiments of 70 million Japanese people. This scene was beyond the comprehension of people in other countries around the world, and even many Americans could not understand why the Japanese did not harbor any hatred toward them. To understand the truth behind this phenomenon, I researched many historical records and discovered that it might be related to the methods the United States used to transform Japanese thinking. They employed 4 strategies to change the once death-defying Japanese warriors into the people described earlier. It is well known that the Japanese of that era were extremely fanatical and unafraid of death. One important reason for this was their widespread belief in Shintoism, which regarded the emperor as a divine being. They firmly believed that they were protected by the gods and that even sacrificing their lives was an honor. When the US military was preparing to land in Japan, the Japanese rallied with the slogan, 100 million yokusai, which means 100 million people ready to fight to the death. This slogan so alarmed President Truman that he hastily implemented Plan B, the atomic bombings. When the 2 mushroom clouds rose over Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the Japanese truly felt fear for the first time, but they did not completely surrender. When MacArthur landed in Japan with 4,000 US troops, the Japanese were prepared to die. To avoid a tragic scene, MacArthur carried a handgun to use for suicide if necessary, indicating that even he believed the Japanese were not a people who would easily surrender. Therefore, his first task upon arriving in Japan was to destroy the Japanese people's belief system. MacArthur first moved next door to the Japanese emperor, forcing the emperor to come to him. When the emperor, trembling with fear, finally appeared before him, MacArthur's first words were, "Please come over here." The emperor, looking puzzled, walked over to his side, and an American soldier with a camera quickly took 3 photos, which were then published on the front pages of the newspapers. Overnight, all of Japan realized that their godlike emperor was just an ordinary, small, and frail man. Compared to MacArthur's confident and commanding presence, the emperor seemed almost awkward. From that day on, the Japanese people's faith in the emperor began to waver. MacArthur also abolished Shintoism as the state religion and removed Shinto content from textbooks, cutting off the Japanese people's belief system at its source. He forced the emperor to read the famous Humanity Declaration on New Year's Day in 1946. In this declaration, the emperor told all Japanese people that he was not a god, but an ordinary person, and that the idea of Japanese superiority and their destiny to rule the world was merely a fabrication. When the declaration was announced, it was as if Japan had been hit by a 9.0 magnitude earthquake. The once revered emperor had completely fallen from his pedestal. The Americans targeted Japan's education system by recalling all history and geography textbooks. In 1946, they sent an educational mission consisting of 27 experts and scholars to implement comprehensive reforms in Japanese education. The reforms included: 1. criticizing Japan's past actions and culture. 2. Promoting American ideals of freedom and democracy. 3. Introducing a more relaxed education system, emphasizing less classroom time and more experiential learning, known as joyful education. The result of these reforms was that many Japanese children experienced a significant decline in their learning abilities. They struggled to write kanji correctly, had difficulties with arithmetic, and often couldn't name their hometowns or historical figures. They also became unfamiliar with traditional activities, instead developing a strong interest in American sports like football and baseball. This is why, in anime such as Doraemon, Japanese characters are often depicted with a particular fondness for playing baseball. Even more astonishingly, under American suppression, the Japanese refrained from using their national flag and anthem for decades. It wasn't until 1999 that the current national flag and anthem were officially established. In October 1999, a high school principal in Hiroshima committed suicide on the day of the school's graduation ceremony. The reason was that the Ministry of Education required the raising of the national flag and the singing of the national anthem at the ceremony, while the school staff strongly opposed it. The principal, caught in the middle, felt forced to take this extreme step. This incident reflects the thoroughness of American ideological influence on Japan. Initially, many Japanese war criminals were expected to be executed, but the Americans utilized Japanese individuals to control other Japanese. As a result, many war criminals not only escaped execution, but also took on important positions. For instance, Matsutaro Shoriki, the owner of Japan's largest newspaper, Yomiuri Shimbun, and the second largest television network, Nippon TV, was a Class A war criminal. Similarly, Shigedeka Ogata, vice president and editor-in-chief of Asahi Shimbun, another major newspaper, was a Class A war criminal, and Nobusuke Kishi, the grandfather of Shinzo Abe, was also pardoned by the Americans. Investigations revealed that, at the time, Japan's 5 major newspapers and 6 major television networks were all controlled by these war criminals. These individuals heavily promoted American friendliness in politics and media, leading many Japanese to gradually believe that the U.S. military presence was meant to protect them and that American influence brought democracy and freedom, making Japan more civilized. Through long-term propaganda, a large number of Japanese people not only harbored no resentment towards the United States, but were also very grateful. This strategy consisted of 2 parts. The first part was to feminize the Japanese spirit. In the 1950s, the U.S. supported Japanese-American Johnny Kitagawa, who established Johnny and Associates, an agency that produced small, youthful, and effeminate male idols. Stars like Takuya Kimura became popular among young people due to their soft and delicate images. In this environment, Japanese men transformed from the masculine and vigorous figures of the Showa era into a generation of introverted and effeminate otaku during the Heisei era. The second part involved reducing the physical stature of the Japanese population. In 1980, a peculiar academic paper emerged in Japan, advocating that low birth weight could reduce the risk of pregnancy toxemia. Many doctors believed this and consequently imposed strict weight controls on pregnant women, leading to a significant number of underweight and underdeveloped infants. The media also heavily promoted the advantages of being short, and women predominantly pursued thinness as beauty. They engaged in strict dieting and vegetarianism, often to the point of excessive weight loss. As a result, the younger generation in Japan became shorter by an average of 0.6 centimeters for men and 0.2 centimeters for women compared to their parents' generation. In addition to these strategies, MacArthur facilitated continuous aid from the U.S. government to Japan. Through economic loans similar to the Marshall Plan, he helped Japan's economy recover rapidly and achieve high growth rates. MacArthur also drafted a sample constitution for Japan, known as the MacArthur Draft, which guaranteed the rights of the poor and women. This allowed Japan to transition into a modern society. Under MacArthur's sweeping reforms, Japan quickly emerged from the shadow of war and experienced rapid economic development. This, in turn, helped to mitigate the Japanese people's resentment towards the United States. To deeply transform a country, you only need to accomplish these four things: destroy its belief system, infiltrate its education, control its media, and weaken its physical stature. Adding some economic support can enhance these effects even further. We should not mock the Japanese for this. If one country can treat another country in such a way, what about one group of people treating another group, or one class treating another class? Think about it deeply. Perhaps we are experiencing some of these things ourselves.